Okay, so officially welcome everyone to our fire session of the Design Leadership Program. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know exactly where you are, but please do feel very welcome to our fire session. A little bit about who we are and what we're doing. Today, we're going to be discussing the journey of design leadership. And I am Juliana Proserpio. I am one of the co-founders of ECOS. ECOS is this Desirable Futures Lab driven by design. We have two units. One side is ECOS School, where we teach design thinking, design in all the realms of design, including design leadership. And then we also have the other side, that is the lab, that we work with different organizations to accelerate innovation, design new services, and business models. And we have today the one and only Andy Pillane, designer, coach, trainer, writer, speaker, podcaster. He was a global masterclass leader in the design leadership of season 1, and he has since then been joining us as our design leadership coach for the participants who join us in the VIP ticket. So he is also coaching some of our participants. So Andy, do you want to say a quick hi before I jump in and explain how this is going to work?
I will say hi, and thanks for joining. And then I'm going to save the rest for later.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we are the Desirable Futures Lab. As I said, if you don't know us, we help businesses create value and innovation for good. And in the side of the school, our main goal is to help people and organizations master the innovation mindset, skills, and tools. So our purpose is to foster the next generation of innovators and design leaders worldwide. So welcome. We're going to be talking a lot about that. And we are also part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. We're very proud to be part of that. It is this alliance between different schools worldwide, and we are one of them. And we do a lot of exchange with all of them and exchanging design and the next realms of design and design thinking. So everything we do is through design at ECOS, and we believe a lot in the power of design as a way to transform your realities, enabling preferred futures. So the course that we're going to be talking about later is, and that's why we're hosting this session, the Design Leadership Program is a global masterclass program where we have 10 weeks. And in these 10 weeks, on Mondays, you always have a global masterclass. And on Wednesdays, you always have regional workshops. And on this design leadership program, we'll be covering all of these topics. Design is leadership, design in the C-suite, service design is the new management, creating high-value products, facilitation is a leadership skill, new technologies pushing boundaries, shaping diverse teams, shaping organizations through design ops, articulating the value of design, and paths for design leaders. The reason why we created this program was to really help designers get to the next step of their leadership journey. And also because in 2020, we were interviewing many design leaders, and they were all telling us the same thing. They were telling us that they were hiring many designers and their teams were growing, but it was very hard to find design leaders who could get into that position of leadership. And also sometimes the design ladder was being pulled, and it didn't mean that these people who were becoming leaders, they were not necessarily there ready to be adequate and to deliver value in this position. So we saw this as an opportunity as well, and also in a way for us to enhance the quality and the delivery that designers do in businesses and in society. So we said, there's an opportunity for us to create a design leadership program. So then we created this global program. And as a global program, you are going to be experiencing all these facets of design leadership, of you, how do you become a design leader, and what is the relationship of you and yourself? How do you understand your purpose? How do you understand your strengths and your flaws? What is the relationship of design leadership and others? How do you shape and manage design teams? And how do you lead amazing products and services? And how do you relate with systems? How do you articulate the value of design? How do you bring ethics? How do you bring real impact? And how do you design a better organization for your design team and for to the relation with other teams as well? So for season 3, we have already confirmed these global masterclass leaders. We have Bruce Mao again, Stephen Gates again, coming back. We also have Leslie and Noel, Mark Stickerdorn, Emiliano Kinkelli, and I'm going to be hosting the last session as PAFSA's design leaders. And basically, this is an exclusive program for design and innovation leaders. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about this journey of becoming a design leadership today with Andy. The program starts on October 10th. We already are in season 3, and you can check on our website a lot of the testimonials of the leaders who participated on it. So we're receiving great feedback. It's been an amazing transformational journey. Really nice also to connect globally with other design leaders, because sometimes what we have been learned is that sometimes you are alone, maybe in a place where you are one of the only design leaders out there, and there you can have this network and really learn and exchange with your other peers. So without further ado, we are going to get started, and we are going to be talking about design leadership and the design leadership journey. So Andy, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for joining us tonight or today for you. So please introduce yourself, tell who you are. Maybe some people know you, maybe I think they probably do because they are here to see you, but it's always good to reintroduce yourself and share a little bit of your story and who you are.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So I'm Andy Plain, as you probably heard a few too many times already. My journey or who I am. So, but I start with what I do now. So most of the time, probably about 80-90% of what I do now is design leadership coaching. And I coach people from kind of lead and upwards, usually in one-to-one coaching sessions. And if I'm going to just work backwards from it. So some of the other stuff I do is I do train design teams, mostly in sort of service design, but in things like storytelling and other stuff too. So sometimes do work with teams and mentor those teams and train them as well. But that's sort of occasional, whereas the most of the work is one-to-one. And it kind of arose because as I was, the story was I went freelance. I left Fjord, where I used to work, where I was one of the global design directors or a regional design director when I was in Australia for APAC, and then a global one for a thing called Fjord Evolution, which was about all the stuff about keeping our designers all on sort of aligned on the way we work, and it was the whole sort of learning and development part of Fjord. But after that, I went freelance on the 1st of March 2020, which was kind of fantastic timing with the pandemic. And I was actually looking to do more of the training stuff, which is what I had been doing at Fjord. I'd been doing a lot of that internally, also for Accenture and also for clients. And then I ended up having these lots of conversations with potential clients around, they were, I was trying to get the training gig, and they were kind of saying, yeah, I'm not really sure how to do this, and I don't know who should my next hire be, and I'm not, and sort of, I guess, sharing all their insecurities with me. And as I was talking about it, my wife, who's a psychotherapist, actually said, why are you giving all of that away for free? And I realized that that's the work, and actually that for me is the much more interesting work to help these people go through that what I've called the sort of the dip, or this sort of journey of leadership. And I think the unspoken bit, and probably the more important bit of the leadership part, is less to do with the tactical stuff of, how do I scale a design team, and what's my next hire, and what are the career pathways and stuff. That's all important. But the sort of inner journey, I think, is one of the things that doesn't get spoken about enough. And it's often really difficult for people. So that's mostly what I'm coaching people on. And so prior to that, I mentioned I worked for Fjord for some time. They're now Accenture Song. Then prior to that, I did a lot of teaching, and it's actually through teaching, I think I got a lot of my understanding of coaching and mentoring, from bachelor students through to masters and postgraduate. And all the time I was always doing kind of commercial work at the same time. And then going right back, I've been around in interactive media or digital since far too long, like 30 years or so. So, and that was my kind of original, the very first group of people that I worked with when I left uni was actually one of my professors, and a group of us had studied together, and their sort of siblings and boyfriends and stuff. And there were 10 of us. We formed a group called Anti-Rom, and it was a flat collective structure. So we were all equal shareholders of this company. We tried lots of different kind of methods of the way we used to sort of work through this shell company, which is a kind of different conversation around collectives. But interestingly for me, that was my sort of first experience of working commercially. So the idea of then going into somewhere where there's a hierarchy and leadership and things was quite alien when I experienced that later on, and it didn't make much sense to me. And I used to kind of hate hierarchies, and now I have a little bit more respect for their use. But it changed. It was definitely relevant in the sense that it shaped the way I think about leadership and the way teams work together too. So I write. I wrote a book about service design, and I also podcast and write my newsletter, which I don't do nearly often enough. But you know, those are all the things, and I still teach.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for introducing yourself. And I think obviously you have a lot of experience in the journey of design leaders. And you were talking a little bit about yourself, but you have been coaching a lot of design leaders out there. So I think I'm gonna ask you the first question. That is, you shared a little bit of your background as a designer, but I wanted to hear from you as well. How do you see the design maturity evolving out there? I think there is a lot of talk and there's a lot of people talking about that. How do you see design maturity evolving, and maybe where you are in your context, or with the people that you're working with? Do you think it's rising? Do you think we are reaching a global design parity, or do you see it differently?
Well, that's such a loaded question. It is. So for some context of my sort of data sample, if you like, I coach people from quite a lot of people from Australia, a few people from the States and Silicon Valley, a few people in Europe, and there's a couple of people in South America too. So a relatively good spread. The thing I would probably maybe ask you, what do you mean by design maturity? Do you mean in terms of designers themselves, or do you mean in terms of companies being mature in design?
Of the company and the level of design maturity that we're reaching, as I think, as a society, as organizations,
Okay.
and more worldwide. Yeah, more general.
I mean, as a society, we're depends what you mean. We're super design mature in terms of our consumption of stuff that gets made, right? I mean, we're all surrounded by these things and stuff, and everyone, and that's the problem, right? Everyone has an appreciation of good design, even if they don't kind of know why, even if it's fairly sort of subconscious. Because that means, everyone's a designer, everyone's got an opinion, right? That's obviously different from understanding how to do it and enabling it happening. I think it's just massively varied, right? Every time I think, oh yeah, okay, we've sort of got this stuff sorted now, I come across another company or a client or a space where I just think, oh my God, it's like 20 years ago all over again. In some countries that's public services, and in some countries that stuff's really good in public services. In some countries it's like right at the beginning. I mean, in Germany it is still pretty basic. I still have, well, I won't hold it up, but my tax return still looks like something that's been spat out by a kind of 1986 mainframe, because it is, and it's just the most terribly designed thing. And the consequences of that is that you can easily miss the payments you're meant to make or things like that. And don't understand things. I mean, it's got like pages and pages of small text on it. It's awful. So those kinds of things, they cost countries, a lot of money when public services are poorly designed, or states. So we're seeing a lot of that. Still seems like nothing has moved. Seen other companies who seem like they're getting it together. Utility companies seem to often have their stuff together. A lot of them still don't. I mean, this, from a service design perspective, in that sort of ecosystem sense of things, all the famous, the usual suspects of kind of telcos, insurance companies, banks and stuff, they're still a complete kind of mess. Although the stuff is looking nicer. By and large, there has been a kind of digital transformation of some sorts. Whether that means design maturity or not, I'm less sure. Part of what's gone on with the rise of product design, and this is a sort of bit of a rant about kind of product design, is that it's in some cases when it's done badly, it's pushed designers back down into a kind of production line, sort of assembly line position, where the PM, the product manager, sort of basically tells them what to create, and they just do it. And there's a whole generation of designers coming through there like that. Having, whereas designers spent the last 20 years trying to become more strategic, and so there's a bit of a kind of split personality going on, I think, in immaturity there. Organizations have got quite, in some respects, quite good or quite efficient at delivery, actually cranking stuff out the door, but are still lagging in the strategic thinking and what design can bring to that. And some of them products has allowed them to sort of some of them kind of slip back into old habits. And for others, it's been fantastic. So I don't want to kind of tar everyone with the same brush.
I think that one of the things that I'm asking also this question, because there is this amazing book by Raymond Turner. I don't know if you ever heard, or you cannot say because it's in blur, but basically it's called Design Leadership by Raymond Turner.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, there is a foreword written by, I forgot who now, by Thomas Lockwood. And he says, look, I think he says, I see almost global design parity. And I think one of the reasons why I brought this up as well in terms of design maturity, because I think sometimes it's not to say that we are in all the organizations, we are all having this design parity, it's all in the same level, but in terms of the expectations of the users and of the end clients and of the people who are using your service, your product, or whatever it is, the expectations are higher and higher. I can see that. So people don't care if you are a small bakery that has just you as an entrepreneur, or if you are a big bank, let's say that has, I don't know, hundreds of designers working in the back end and working to make the experience smooth. But the expectation of the experience, people expect the same. There is a certain level, I guess, that we are all expecting in a way. So I think that this is something that I can probably see happening. I don't know if you have any perception on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there was a thing that happened in the mid 2000s or late 2000s, which was, thanks to Apple, really, the iPhone, and then the kind of the rise of Android as well, meant that really saw it in the enterprise space, right? Because enterprise software is still awful. I mean, really kind of terrible. Anyone who's had to use a procurement system, even in the last 5 years, I would prefer to stick forks in my eyes. Really, it's just the most awful stuff, even though these are our new procurement system. So all of that kind of stuff has been generally pretty dreadful, and was for a long time because people's reference was Microsoft and that suite of software. And then, the rise of smartphones and people having these different experiences on another device in their life, and then the beginning of kind of bring your own device in organizations. It's kind of weird to think now that you wouldn't have your own stuff like on your phone, but you were given a phone, and and it was that, and you were given a laptop, or all of that stuff was very, very regimented. It meant a whole load of people suddenly had a different set of reference experiences, and I've really heard over and over again people saying things like, the CEO, since the CEO got his or her iPad or iPhone, they're looking at it going, why is our stuff so crap? Why can't it be like this? And that kind of kickstarted a whole bunch of stuff. And so obviously, the influence of that being in everyone's hands, and the kind of rise of that whole world has made a massive difference, because you've got a different set of, a different set of norms to which with which you're competing. That was the whole thing about kind of Fjord's liquid expectations thing, which is, I no longer expect my bank to be as good as another bank. I expect my bank to be as good as, Amazon or Airbnb or whatever it is. The expectations just transcend boundaries. They're fluid.
I think that's a good example, because it's not necessarily only in your category, but in any kind of experience that we are expecting that. So thank you for that. And we are warming up our conversation on design leadership and the journey of design leadership. I forgot to say this at the beginning. So if you have any question, if you want to comment, please do so. Pop in the chat. We really want to make this and hear what you think and what you want to guide this conversation through. It's going to be a conversation. So please do put on the chat if you have any comments or if you want to ask something to Andy. Don't be shy. Put it there. And we talked a little bit about the context of design maturity. And I wanted to jump to this next topic that is talking about, I know that Andy has an amazing experience about that, because I think you see when you're coaching other design leaders, but you call this the deep in design leadership. And I think this is really interesting thing that sometimes we're not aware. And I wanted to ask you about that. What is that, and what it means and what it happens?
So, I mean, I experienced this myself, and at least once, and probably more than once. There's a thing that happens, and I know I see it all the time. I see it obviously with my coachees too, which is, you know, your role in design. You aim in the early days to become very good at your craft, right? And the sort of stuff around how do jobs get in the door, how do we kind of make money, and how do we kind of grow this team of people? That's someone else's job. And so you focus generally on your craft. And I think it's probably true of other professions. I know at least I see a couple of people on the call who I know who would identify as, well, Mike, you're one, you know, you're both a developer, but you're also a musician, right? So I think there's a thing there where you're kind of building up your craft, your personal identity is quite bound up with it. And then at some point, if you keep going up the ladder, you get into a role where you're leading people or managing people. There's a kind of difference between those two, but let's just keep them the same for the moment. And you do less of the craft. You're not on the tools as much, right? So you do less of the work on the tools and of the craft. And yet you're a beginner at kind of managing people or leading people. And so the dip is this crossover. My little sketch of it is sort of one graph going like that and the other one going like that. Is you sort of go through a little period where you're not very good at either of them, because you've given up, you're sort of getting rusty on your craft, and also you're beginning in this leadership role. And it quite often, not always, but it quite often coincides with the sort of midlife time of people's lives as well. So, you know, most of my coaches, not all of them, I have younger ones too, but most of them are between sort of mid to late 30s and late 40s, right? It's really, really common. Where you've sort of you followed the script, right? You've got to everywhere where you sort of everyone said you should be. You follow the next step, the next role, and so forth. And there is not only, now I'm here, I don't know if I like this, or I don't know if I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to be found out. So that's all of that bit of it. At the same time, there's a kind of little bit of, well, is this all there is? I think I'm a bit bored with design, and what am I contributing to the world and stuff? All the natural stuff that happens kind of at that sort of midlife moment. And so that's kind of mostly what I'm coaching people through is that dip. It's you kind of think you've made it, and actually it doesn't feel like it. And so that's what I'm looking at. And if you don't resolve that stuff, you know, and there's no shame in this. One thing is to say, do you know what? I thought this was I wanted this, but I don't, and I want to go back to the craft. And I think that's a really fine and mature decision to make. But if you carry on in the leadership role and you don't kind of resolve that tension, you end up having the who you are really and how you're turning up to work. They get further and further apart, and that just burns people out. And it's really horrible to be led by someone going through that, because they tend to be. You can end up being accidentally kind of really toxic. So yeah, that's mostly what I'm trying to do. But that's what the deep is.
That's amazing. I love this explanation. I think Marvin is giving you a clap. Thank you, Marvin. That's really nice, because I see, and in the design leadership program, we hear some of the participants, there is this struggle at the beginning. I remember you always say as well that when you are going through these deep, are not good at the other side yet as well. So you're kind of like in this limbo where you're not good at anything, because you're not doing your craft, you're not doing you're not doing the management or the leadership well. So it's kind of like this limbo as well. People do struggle, and it's very hard. It's a hard moment for design leaders to be in. So just segue with the other question. And again, please do make your comment in the chat if you like, and do ask other questions as well. Because I'm just going to follow up, because these other question, the number 3, is basically about the struggles. I know that you talk with a lot of people. So what are the struggles and the coolness of being a design leader? What do you think? Because we were talking about this day, but what are these two sides? Because I'm sure there are good things as well.
Yeah, the coolness.
So what are these two sides? The struggles that you think people do face the most, and what is the bright side of it and the good side of it?
The coolness. So, it's about as cool as being a dad, in the sense that you kind of suddenly have responsibility for people, and it kind of feels like you are kind of a proper adult, but you're about as cool as a dad. That's the thing. So I don't know if I really kind of think of it as being cool. I know there are some people who kind of manage to, pull it off, uh, and have the fancy glasses and that whole kind of vibe. Most of that, though, I think is armor. I think that is there's a little bit of kind of, it's a bit of a sort of armor plating around people, that whole sort of cool style thing of being a design leader. Listen, I think one of the things is, it is quite nice. A lot of designers do get bored with designing. So once you have been designing for quite a few years, the problems aren't very new, and there's only so many times you see the same thing over and over again, where you kind of think, oh, there's not really much challenges there anymore for me. So one of the nice things is it becomes a new set of challenges, like sort of understanding people and working with people, and sort of helping mentoring people, and that can be hugely rewarding. The other thing is you finally get to kind of put your money where your mouth is, and do the things you've been complaining about, when you've been further down the tree, and that is, that's a sort of a cool thing, right? You finally are empowered, hopefully, to do the stuff. I think the the struggles are different. There's quite a sort of small bandwidth in the middle, where the struggles really change. So if someone who's a lead, and by which I mean they're leading a project, they're leading a team on a project or something like that, and they're ostensibly the most senior person outside of say the design director or creative director, whoever it is on that team, and they quite often do a lot of stakeholder management too. Plus they're leading a team of people, plus you're meant to be at the top of your craft game. That is, I think, one of the most stressful times. And the worst thing about it is you're often not officially in leadership at that point, right? So you don't get the same support or coaching, for example, as people who are in, part of sort of the leadership team or the executive leadership team or senior leadership team, whatever it's called. And yet you're doing quite a lot of stuff. I think it's a really important role for people to do, because I think you actually learn sort of the microcosm of things, but it's incredibly stressful. So those are people who are very close to burnout. I think as you get a bit further up, then in the sort of head of or sometimes director, it's different. Like those roles are different in different companies. One of the worst places to be is to feel like you have all the responsibility but none of the autonomy. None of the ability to actually make changes. Where you've got senior executive leadership, C-suite, VP of something or whatever, and you're given all of this kind of responsibility or accountability rather, but none of the responsibility, and that's a really difficult situation to be in. And the larger the organization, the worse that usually is, and that is a real struggle, because you're serving so many masters. You're trying to kind of protect your team, and you're trying to create a culture and an environment where they can thrive and enable in the best ways. Plus, you've got kind of people from above wanting outcomes and impact and stuff that's quite often wrong. But even if it's not, it's kind of often at odds with what you're trying to do with that team, and that can be a real tension that you have to balance. So I think those are some of the struggles. I would say, though, the biggest kind of shift and kind of reframe mentally for that is this weird thing where the more senior you become as a designer, the less you talk about design. So that what you're actually doing is shifting your conversation to talk about the impact. And one of my favorite sort of coaching questions is to ask, so what, who cares, right? Because designers get used to talking about design as de facto a good thing, right? We should have more of it because design's great and designers should run the world. And they don't question that so much. And you're spending your time and you're rising up and you're talking with the designers and leading teams and so forth. You're going to do a lot of talking about the craft and why we should be doing more of whatever it is. And probably no one's going to question, because you're all designers, whether you should be doing that or not, or why that matters. It's just self-evident to you. For management, it's kind of stuff they don't really care about. Right? They don't really care about your design process. They care about whether you actually create the impact that they're after and outcomes they're after or not. And so a lot of the shift happens where you start talking about that. And the fact that you happen to do this via design is almost kind of incidental. And the kind of struggle there is, I need more resources to grow the team in order to get those outcomes that you want and so forth. And I need us to work in a different way. So I have to talk about design to a certain degree, but I also need to frame it in a way that's really all about things that you care about, as CEO or, whoever you are, senior stakeholder. And so there's, again, this kind of split that you have to take all the time.
That's really nice. Thank you for explaining and just sharing. I think one of the things that you mentioned about these about the struggles, and I also wanted to bring something that Marvin said here. Thank you, Marvin, for coming. He's saying, for me, the coolness comes with being able to design teams, organizations, and process. This can be much more impactful than being an individual contributor. And just building on that, I'm gonna bring a little bit about about Birgit Mager, who was one of our global masterclasses as well, and also now Mark Stickerdorn. They're all in service design, and this is something that we're talking now about, service design as a new management tool, and I think this is something that has been emerging as well. And I heard also from Joko Muratowski. He is now leading a unit at the Deakin University. And he says, look, I'm not a design leader, but I'm leading by design. And what he means by that I thought was very interesting, is exactly the service design as a management tool, right? Putting people first, articulating all of the stakeholders. And I think this is something that when you start to become a leader, you have the, let's say, the scope that you're able to influence on those things. That maybe if you are an individual contributor, this is maybe not possible. Maybe in some organizations are, but maybe this is not possible. I think the other side of it that I think it's interesting as well is when you start to influence and create future visions. I think this is something that maybe if you are an individual contributor, you might be contributing to future visions in terms of a product or a specific service, but maybe not of the whole organization, of where it's going, how you're going to be changing the industry, and these sort of things. So I guess the scope sometimes becomes bigger, but more intangible, as you were saying, Andy,
Yeah.
and it can be very overwhelming. I think that's when there is this dip, there is the struggle. And if you are in the middle, that you're not in the executive level yet, and you are in the middle of this, it's similar to any kind of middle management, let's say, role as well. You are in between these two, and it's sometimes it's hard to navigate, especially if you lose the touch with your craft. That sometimes is very important for designers. And I guess this is also a question that I have for you. And do you think that as a design leader, is this inevitable that you're going to lose touch with the craft? Or do you think that it's healthy? Because I feel like if you lose touch completely, and that's my opinion, it's not correct, but I feel like, I'm not even sure about that. But I feel that if you lose completely the touch of it, you kind of stay also behind in a way, because you don't know what you're guiding anymore, and maybe you're not aware of the new tools or technique that you might be using. You kind of stay stuck sometimes in your own ways of how you should be. So I wanted to hear from you about this part. Is it inevitable, or should you keep trying to push your craft? I don't know. What do you think?
So, one of the learnings for me particularly in the early days of kind of digital, was that the sort of pyramid of experience was inverted. That up until that time, generally you had this sort of grand old kind of designers at the top with, and the craft had shifted and changed a bit, because there's always new technology, but not so rapidly as it did with, say, the beginning of kind of creating digital interactive stuff, where you really had the people who were at the top just had no idea. and the people at the bottom kind of knew everything because they were exploring this stuff all the time. And in many respects, that hasn't changed that much. You know, the new tools and all of those things are always going to be coming. You know, I remember going to Flash conferences, right, and people talking about themselves as Flash designers. And I remember having conversations going, I wouldn't necessarily identify yourself with one product because of one software application, because at some point that's going to go away. And, you know, it seemed inconceivable at the time. You know, the same is true of kind of any other tech. So, but what you gain, you know, in experience, and I realized at some point I just gave up, right? I gave up trying to kind of learn every new version of Flash or whatever, because it's like, here's the new version, it's got 1,000 new methods. I was like, okay, I'm never going to learn those. And not only that, I have to unlearn all the other stuff. And Flash in particular went through a kind of period where it's like, oh my God, this is like, you've just turned Spanish into German, and now I have to learn it all over again. It was such a kind of big shift. Whereas someone else who hadn't ever learned that first version of it didn't have to unlearn it. So I kind of realized this is a sort of treadmill or a hamster wheel that you kind of want to get off at some point. What the youngsters will never catch you up on is your pattern recognition and your kind of experience, right? And what you're really bringing to a team as someone, as a sort of wise elder, right, is I've seen this kind of thing before, right? And to try and sort of guide that and prevent kind of obvious mistakes. You don't have to know how to kind of solve everything. I think it's important to understand how people work, and that is, you know, in the tools they're using and what enables them. I much prefer the idea of sort of enabler rather than leader, actually, as a term, because it's kind of got positive and negative connotations, right? You can enable toxic culture and kind of all sorts of bad behaviors as much as you can enable good ones. And so understanding that is important, but being able to be sort of compete on the craft, I don't think is. I think the craft shifts, and I think it's a sort of really it's your ability to understand, which is the true craft that kind of always grows. The way you sort of execute is less important. It's the difference between, you know, if you pick up a chisel, you know, you use the same, a master carpenter uses the same chisel as anyone else, right? But their understanding of kind of how the wood reacts and the kind of environment and so forth is much, much deeper because they've got years and years of experience. And that's the difference. And I think that's what you're kind of there to offer. So, you know, it is important. I have this kind of phrase, which is this idea of, you know, are the right people able or enabled to work in the right way at the right time? And as you unpack it, like, who are the right people? And it's a very good question. You know, what's the right way? Don't know. It's also a very good question. What's the right time? You know, again, when should they be having those conversations and stuff? I think all of those things are really important to constantly kind of readdress. And those people will tell you. And they may sometimes be at odds with each other, and that's a thing to resolve. But otherwise, you run the risk of sort of telling everyone what pencil they should be using. And that's not, I don't think, the role of a design leader.
Nice. Thank you. That's good. Thank you for the answer. And I wanted to just ask one more question before our final conclusion, where you're going to be talking a little bit more about coaching and design leadership. So I'll skip this one because I want to go to this one. And in this question, I'm going to be putting another poll here for everyone. So answer, if you can, what is the level of design maturity in your organization? Do you think that it's advanced, or do you think that it's starting? And the reason why I'm asking this, because we want to hear, because the question for Andy is, the question for Andy is, how is the culture established in companies with a higher design maturity, and how to compare with legacy companies, or maybe companies that has design maturity that it's not so mature, that are starting. And the reason why I'm asking that is because probably there is a difference between you as a design leader leading in a company that has high design maturity and has very low design maturity. So I just wanted to hear from you. What do you think about that? And so far, we have 18 people who answered, and we have 22% who are in advanced design maturity, and we have 78% who say that they are starting. I just want to say as well that because we are probably all designers here, we're probably very biased, and we're being very, very, you know, when we know, usually when you ask this question, people don't know as much about design or any topic, they say, oh, we're very high in design maturity. But if they know about it, they're probably going to say they're going to be putting us as if it's starting. But of course, I think it's an interesting way for us to see as well, because if we think it's starting, I think that's probably something there that we need to mature. I'll end the poll. Thank you everyone for participating, and I'll share the results with you. But Andy, if you could talk.
Susan has very reasonably asked, what about in between? You know, between advanced and starting, which is true.
Yes. Are you in between, Susan? Maybe you are. That's why you're asking that. That's a fair point.
Yeah. And Marvin's just made this point down there about it's not a one-way street, it goes back and forth.
Fair point. So yeah, tell us, what do you think? Is there a different way of leading in a higher maturity design organization, or versus in a low maturity design organization as a design leader, or you think it's fairly the same?
So I think it is a bit, I don't know if it's a sort of roller coaster or it's a sort of spiral probably, or something like that, where you're sort of going around the same things again, but kind of gradually moving up. You know, I have one particular coach here I can think of, and you know, he's very explicitly said, I like the challenge of going in somewhere where there isn't an established design culture, or at least there's a kind of a bit of one, and then kind of building up that team and building up that kind of maturity, really. Whereas others I have who are like deeply frustrated by you know, they just don't get it, and kind of trying to do all this stuff and are constantly thwarted by the organization. So there's a kind of personal answer there. I mean, not my person, but I think you have to kind of be clear about what kinds of challenges you enjoy, right? Because if you are really wanting to try and push out some really fantastic design work and make some change in the world out there and improve a product or service in some way, in an organization who's kind of getting in the way of itself all the time, and you're not interested in that work of helping it get out of the way of itself, you're going to just be really frustrated, right? If you're, you know, in an organization, and this is sometimes startups, it's sometimes departments within a larger organization, where, you know, they want to do it, but they don't know how, and kind of everything's very nascent and stuff. And then that's a kind of different set of problems, which is what we need to sort of grow this. We need to sort of help stakeholders understand, and other people in the organization understand, that there are different ways of working and so forth, and gradually build up the skill. That means kind of bringing in, you know, at the beginning we've only got one or two people maybe wearing multiple hats, and all of that stuff. That's a different sort of experience to the one I just mentioned. And there's, you know, there's a whole host in between. So part of it is comes down to this fundamental question: is do I like the work I do every day, right? Am I getting annoyed about stuff that I deeply just hate, and this is just a bad place for me? Or am I just kind of going through the frustrations or the same you know, same things again, but I recognize this is a thing and this is what I do, right? And sometimes it's like being otherwise I talk to service design students about this quite a lot. So, you know, most of your work is going to be around stakeholder management, and all that stuff you just talked about was sort of, you know, service design as a management tool. It is mostly that. It's not that much coming up with kind of brilliant service design concept and just kind of executing it. It's almost like never that. If you're not prepared for that other stuff, it's like being a firefighter who complains about getting burned. It's like you're just in the wrong job, right? That's not what you do for a living, is put yourself in front of fires. If you want to do something different, then it's, you know, you're you need to go to a different place. So that's the kind of more important thing, I think, is, you know, do you have the mindset for the role? I know other people who thrive in that whole kind of stakeholder wrangling thing, and in terms of sort of getting people aligned and sort of the playing the game, if you like, and they're able to sort of emotionally not get drawn into the frustrations of that, because they just see it as this kind of a game that they're playing to try to organize people and create this pathway for design maturity. and they're really good at it, and they thrive in that, and it's not something where they then spend their evenings worrying about it and kind of stressing about it, and so that I guess is my my sort of one answer to that. Each organization is different. There's cycles, or that sort of spiral I mentioned, where I think initially it's a first step and it's like all a bit scary and weird, but there's often quite a lot of motivation and support, sometimes from right at the top, to become more design enabled. I don't want to say design led. And there's some maybe initial excitement about it, and there's a little bit of a honeymoon period, and that's great. It's great to be in that kind of time. And then, because often the impact can be 1 or 2 years away, the immediate kind of like, why are we doing this whole design thing? It doesn't seem to be making any difference, kicks in. And then there's a sort of bit of a trudge to go through to try and kind of show the value and the kind of impact. And then I think there's a stage where a lot of kind of product has ended up at the moment, which is, we know how to do this. We've got this design stuff sorted. We know how CX works. We know how kind of product works. We've got it all kind of sorted out. And everyone's kind of humming away in little silos again, all over again, in their kind of teams and squads, or whatever they are called, pods, feature teams, product teams. Everyone's really, they're cranking out stuff and delivering stuff. But that whole, again, service design perspective of how is all of this hanging together as a coherent whole is all over the place. And so they've just kind of reinvented the same problem that they had, 10 years ago, all over again. And that, in a sense, is toughest, because ostensibly in each individual kind of pod, everything's going really well. We're pumping out really great stuff. So yeah, but that really great stuff doesn't match up with this really great stuff here. I see Drew on the call. Cars are famous for this, right? Which is, your software is really shit. And that's why I have CarPlay now, because compared to all the effort you've put into the kind of the hardware of the car, you see that stuff happening all the time. And the kind of focus on my little group of people cranking out stuff as products, and delivering stuff really well, means that, services and products that are created in silos are experienced in bits. And it's sort of invisible, right? Because there isn't a kind of overall metric of how this all hangs together as a sort of KPI.
That's really insightful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andy. I think you and Marvin also mentioned earlier, it's really important. And I think it's a great insight to think about. It's not really if you are a design, an organization who has high design maturity or low design maturity, but it's actually a cycle, like you were saying before. And it depends on the moment. And maybe I just remember as well that I think we're almost at the time to wrap up, but I just remember that this reminds me of the famous TV show from Netflix called Dark, that they say the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. So it's a never ending cycle. So it's kind of like that, but hopefully it's kind of like those two organizations where you kind of go and spiral upwards. So hopefully it is a little bit like that, they're not going backwards 100%. So that would be the best. So just thank you so much. I'll be doing one more question, but I just wanted to, because this question is related to the program. I'll just thank you for all the answers, and thank you everyone for joining. So if you are interested in the Design Leadership Program, do join us. It starts on October 10th until the end of this month of August. We still have the early bird. So do join and check out our website. Usually in this course, it is a 10-week program. Every Mondays you have your global masterclasses. It is with the whole globe all together with amazing design leaders. Everyone comes together. It's very inspirational in all of those topics that I mentioned before. And on Wednesdays, we have more intimate cohort only in your region, where we do the local workshops, where you're going to be practicing your design leadership and learning from each other and networking and everything around that. So on top of that, I wanted to go back and ask Andy, and if you want to get the discount, let us know. You can click here, take a picture, or I think Rafa will also be sharing the link here on the chat, but you can also take a picture. But on that, for the design leadership on season 1 and 2, we have been experimenting with Andy on this design leadership coaching. So since season 1, and now we just wrapped up season 2, Andy has been coaching some of our design leaders that participated in the program. So we have the VIP ticket, and as part of the VIP ticket, you receive mentorship sessions and coaching sessions, with Andy Pillane. So I wanted to ask you, Andy, to explain a little bit, how does a design leadership coaching session happens and what does it mean? Just so that they learn a little bit, that they can also be doing it as part of the program. If they choose the VIP ticket, of course, they would have coaching sessions with you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So it's a kind of taster, really, is what you'll get kind of with the VIP ticket, because the sort of real work takes several sessions. I when I'm coaching, I have an initial session which is around you exploring yourself and your self-reflections, and I have kind of activity for that, where you go through and really kind of look at what makes you tick, what energizes you and de-energizes you. My favorite lens is this sort of loves, hates, hopes and fears, because they expose quite a lot of stuff, both of your prior experience and your hopes and fears are about the future, right? And kind of loves and hates tend to be around the past. And then some fairly lightweight kind of 360 feedback. So I kind of work with that to start with, where we get the sort of external view of you and the internal view of you, and start to see, are there some patterns or themes and stuff that are emerging? And it's a design process. That's kind of discovery, right? The beginning of it is discovery. And then as we start to move through the sessions, it starts to become clearer of here are kind of 2 or 3 reoccurring, or 5 or 6 reoccurring themes, and we look at working on those. So with the VIP ticket, I can't remember how many sessions we have now. You have to remind me. And there's a sort of taster.
Three of 1 hour. I think.
3 of 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I'll do a kind of 1-2 hour one, which is what I normally do, and then another kind of follow-on one. And then after that, it's up to people if they want to continue or not. Usually I do sort of 6, 12 or 24 on a fortnightly basis. So that is 3 months, 6 months or a year. I have coachees who've been with me for years, and others who kind of do a chunk and that's it. It depends on where people are at. And I guess I would say, navigating that dip is probably the thing I work with most. I try and be the person there who is, so I jokingly say it's somewhere between sort of therapy for designers and training, depending on kind of where you're at, and we move around. I try and be there as the person you can talk to about this stuff that you probably can't talk to at work, right? So either because there's no one else who's a peer of yours at work, or the peer or the boss you have, you probably wouldn't want to say, hey, listen, I've really no idea what I'm doing here, or I'm really worried about this, or my boss is the problem, which is all too common. So that's what we work on, and the kind of it emerges. I don't have a kind of fixed 12-step program that you go through, respond to where you are. So that's what the coaching is.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. I think this wraps up our session. Just a big thank you for everyone for joining us. This session is recorded. You're going to be receiving the recording of the session later on through email. Thank you again for joining. And Andy, when you said therapy for designers, you absolutely got me. That's something that I have been looking specifically for me and for myself. That's really amazing. And I'll just tell you guys a very, very quick and funny story. I have a friend who is a therapist in Brazil, and she's amazing. And she was studying at the time, and she wanted to have someone to test, those Rorschach tests that you do, that you see, like, those images that
ink blot things.
Yeah, the ink blot things. And then you basically, the Rorschach test, you see that, and then you say the first thing that comes up to your mind, and then the therapist will explain and kind of analyze what is in your conscious, something like that. And me being a designer, she was testing because she was doing a study. She was like, can I do it with you? I was like, yeah, sure. So I thought I was in a brainstorming session, and basically I gave like 70 ideas for each image, and then she never gave me the result because she was like, this is impossible to analyze. It's too much data. I'm not going to be able. Until now, I'm always like, please tell me what is the result. She's like, no, I can't. You gave me too much. It's impossible to analyze. I'm like, okay. So jokes aside, thank you everyone for joining so much. Andy, I don't know if you want to say a last, I don't know, remark or anything before we go, but just a big thank you for everyone, and big thank you for you, Andy, for making the time and for joining us.
No, thank you from me. It's, you know, it's it doesn't take me much to kind of just sort of push the buttons for me to just ramble on. So I hope it's been useful and in some way kind of inspiring, or at least thought provoking. There are some other questions that people had in the chat that I saw. Get in touch if you're interested. You'll find me everywhere, I'm sure. And you know, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm not on Facebook or Instagram, but you know, I'm in most other places. But yeah, get in touch, and we can always have a chat. And thank you very much for listening. And for those of you whose evening it is, thank you very much as well for giving up your evening.
Thank you. Have a good day or evening or afternoon, and hope to see you all soon.
Bye.